First National Bank Alaska's 2020 Paycheck Protection Program Loan Forgiveness Webinar. I'm Lewis Ulmer, Business Development Manager here at First National. And on behalf of everybody at the bank, thank you for joining us today. We hope we're able to give you some information that will be useful in your Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness process. Our hosts today are First National lending experts, Chad Stedman and Carl Hines. Chad, would you like to say hello to our guests?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Just giving a little bit about me. I'm the corporate lending director here in Anchorage. I manage 4 teams, about 15 bankers. I've been in the banking business for nearly 20 years. During that career, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different businesses, all the way from construction, nursing homes, food retail, brick plants, fishing, oil industry, and a lot of commercial real estate transactions that we've done. The best part about being a banker is really getting to be part of businesses' management teams and helping them succeed and grow and do new things in this great state. So we work with businesses doing all different types of transactions. Like I said, we'll help them with acquisition, buying buildings, equipment loans, or lines of credit, helping them to help handle their cash flow needs. So just a little bit about me personally. I grew up on the Kenai Peninsula. My parents are still there. I've got 2 brothers who still live there also. I went to high school at Soldotna High School. I'm a proud SoHo Star graduate. But after graduating, I left for a little while, came back to the state about 10 years ago with my wife, Rebecca. And we really enjoy being back in Anchorage. We've got 6 kids. They love all the recreational activities that Alaska has to offer. So really looking forward to talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, Lewis, and helping people get across the finish line with the forgiveness applications. So back to you, Lewis.
Thanks, Chad. Great to have you here. And Carl, over to you.
Thanks, Lewis. My name is Carl Hines. I've worked for First National for 18 years now. I've had the opportunity to work in 7 different communities throughout the state at different positions and getting to know lots of our customers and different folks around the state. And now I oversee all of the lenders and branches outside of Anchorage. So we have 19 branches that come to me, and it gives me great joy to oversee some of those branches that I've worked at firsthand and work with some of those customers at a different level. First National Bank Alaska has been able to help thousands of Alaskans with their PPP needs. And this makes me extremely proud as a lifelong Alaskan and someone who grew up with parents with small businesses. I understand the struggles that those businesses go through. And the PPP program was something that was a big help to many Alaskan businesses. And First National really is the trusted PPP lender. We've already helped many of our customers receive full forgiveness of those loans they received. And hopefully today we can share a little bit more information for those who haven't received full forgiveness so that we can further help them with their financial needs through these tough times. So with that, Lewis, back to you.
Thank you, Carl. Great to have you here as well. First National is now in our 100th year of doing business right here in Alaska. Obviously, a lot has changed over that time, but one of the things that's remained consistent for First National is our commitment to helping our customers succeed and our dedication to helping Alaska communities thrive. The Paycheck Protection Program and our involvement in that program is a great example of that. Between the first PPP loan we did back in April of 2020 until the last PPP loan we did back in May, right before the program ran out of fundings, we have done in excess of 5,500 Paycheck Protection Program loans, in excess of $580 million. So that is $580 million that's going right into Alaska businesses, helping you keep your doors open, keep operating. It's also helping allow you to keep employees with jobs. And that money really is helping continue to move the Alaska economy going forward. We are now Alaska's trusted Paycheck Protection Program lender. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you with your loan. And now we want to do everything that we can to help you get your loan forgiven so you can move on with operating your business and not have to worry about paying any of that money back to the Small Business Administration. One thing I will note, today's webinar is focused on 2020 Paycheck Protection Program loans and the forgiveness process for that. We will be offering a webinar next month for those who received a PPP loan in 2021. But just as an update, 2020 loans is what we are going to be focusing on today for the process there. In order to avoid any disruptions today, we have muted everybody's microphones and we've turned off your videos, but we do want today to be interactive and we want to be able to answer any questions that you have. So on your screen, you should see a little Q&A icon there. If at any point you have a question that you'd like Chad or Carl to answer, click that Q&A icon, type your question in, enter it, and we hope to be able to have time to get to everybody's questions there. And so with that, we're going to dive right in. Carl, I'm going to turn it to you. And if you'll just start with the basics, what exactly is PPP loan forgiveness and why do borrowers have to apply for that forgiveness?
Thanks, Louis. So when the pandemic first hit, there were many programs that came out from the government and even some other agencies to help businesses. And the Paycheck Protection Program was one of the programs that was set up as a loan with the ability to be fully forgiven. So there's also some programs out there that have full repayment required, and there were some that were grant programs, but the PPP program was set up as a loan structure with the ability to be fully forgiven. So when customers applied for the PPP loan, they had to submit what their historic payroll was and expenses in order to verify what the potential for the amount of the PPP loan would be. We took those numbers and helped customers and tried to encourage them to make sure they understood what the requirement would be if the loan, if the funds were not spent on the eligible expenses, it would turn into a loan, so they were prepared for that. Most businesses were able to spend the funds on eligible expenses, which primarily were payroll, rent, utilities, commercial loan interest. And if you were able to spend those on eligible expenses within the covered period, you must apply for forgiveness and there's no loan to be repaid. If you don't apply for that forgiveness, then the funds are turned into an amortizing loan and need to be fully repaid. So our goal today is to help anyone walk through the forgiveness process. And hopefully what we've found is most of our customers are able to get full forgiveness and there's no loan to be repaid. If there is some portion that has to be repaid, that will be amortized out and they will be receiving a payment. But hopefully we can get everyone to that full forgiveness point. Louis?
Thank you, Carl. And Chad, if you'd be willing to briefly talk to our borrowers there and just talk briefly about the actual forgiveness loan process and what they can expect from the beginning of the application until the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely, Louis. So the first step, of course, is that this is all going to be online in First National Bank's online portal for forgiveness. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go on there and get logged onto the portal and get ready to start submitting that application. So the first thing to remember also is that we're not, there's no paper involved. We're not taking paper applications, and that's a good thing because then we're able to submit that online application to the SBA on behalf of the individual. So once the individual gets on the portal, they answer the questions, they go through the application, submit. If there is needed to put information, they can also download that information or upload that information so we can review it. And then it'll be submitted automatically once it's signed and ready and it's assigned to one of our loan officers. At that point, we'll review it. Per the laws, we have 60 days to review it. Now, we're not taking 60 days to review that application. It's going much faster, especially when we use one of the simpler forms. But we'll review it. And then if there is something missing or there's questions that we have, we'll get back in touch with you. you'll either receive a call from a loan officer or there'll be an email back to you asking you for that information. So once that process and we've determined that you've got an eligible application, then we'll turn around and we will submit it to the SBA. Once the SBA has it, they have 90 days to review the application. What we're sort of seeing is kind of a mixed bag of how fast we've seen some be returned back from the SBA as fast as two weeks. I think really some are taking as long as 2 months or longer. So really be patient at this point. Give the SBA a little bit of time. They'll review your application. If they ask for additional information, they will request it. They'll request that, give that first request to First National Bank. We will in turn send you an email asking for what the additional information is, and then we'll resubmit it at that point. So that process is kind of a back and forth. In a lot of cases, what we're seeing is that the SBA gives full forgiveness. At that point, there's no additional action that is required on your behalf. First National Bank will then issue a statement to you. It's important that some people are looking at the statements and they're like, well, this is a statement, not a payoff. Well, what it does is it actually tracks the history of your loan. So what you'll see on there is that a payment was received, interest and principal from the SBA, and your loan was paid off in full. No other action is required. If for some reason that your loan is not paid in full, then at that point, the borrower must start making payments the next month. So what you'll do is you'll get a generated statement that will tell you what your payment is at that point. And at that point, your loan will be in amortization. So that's the process in a nutshell, Lewis.
Great. Thank you, Chad. Just to let folks know, we will be recording this webinar and posting that on our webpage. So at any point, if you want to be able to go back, rewatch this or rewatch specific portions of that, the webpage here is going to show you how to get there. It's exactly the page where you register for that. So in the next few days, you'll see that there. So if there's anything you want to go back. So what we're going to do next is go into the actual online application portal. We want to be able to show you what that portal looks like. I know some folks have gotten in there and started the application process. Some have never seen it before. So we just want to give you a brief update on what that looks like. If you no longer have the email that has the link to our portal, I'll put that on the screen right now. And this is where you're going to be able to pull up the application there. So if you write down that address there, be sure not to use the www. I know that we're used to doing that, but write down that, and that's going to take you directly into the portal where you're going to log in. And the login is the same, whether it's the first time getting in or the second, but you're going to be using your business name, and that business name needs to be an exact match as it is on the loan. And that includes abbreviations, punctuation, etc. If you're having an issue getting in, if you're not exactly sure how the business appears, contact your loan officer. If you're not sure who your loan officer is, you can send us an email to this box there, and they'll be able to tell you exactly how your business name appears. So you're going to use your business name. You're also going to use your tax ID number. And when you enter the tax ID number, don't use any dashes or spaces. Just put that full 9 digits in there. Click the next box. Once you sign in, within 2 minutes, you will receive an email from this email address there. So if you don't see that in your box, check your spam folder, but they're going to be sending you what's called a one-time password. And when you're in the portal, there'll be a little box there that you're going to click, put that password in, click next. If you don't do it within 2 minutes, go back to the login page, reconfirm, and you'll get another link sent to you. Once you log in, this is what your dashboard looks like. As you'll kind of see, there are 4 sections to the application, and then the information you see there at the bottom of the screen, that will flood in directly from your loan. You'll notice there's a previous and a next button there for you to be able to go through each step in the application, as well as some other functions here that we'll get into a little bit more later. But this is what the dashboard looks like. And then you're going to go through each of the 4 sections that are up here. Only the first 3 require any action on your part. The fourth one is basically just giving you confirmation that you've gotten the application in. And we're going to go through each one of these 4 sections. One thing I'll point out right now, make sure you are saving your progress frequently as you go along to make sure you don't lose any information that you're putting in there. At any point during the application, if you're looking for any more information, if it's asking you a question and you're not exactly sure what that means on the application, there are 2 sections within the portal you can go. The first is the Knowledge Center, which is just on the left-hand column there. I showed you this earlier. Down below, if you click the Knowledge Center, that's going to allow you to do a search for questions and answers, or you can click on a specific topic when it's asking you for information to plug into that. When you do click the Knowledge Center, this is what you're going to see. And on the left-hand column, you can either click a particular topic, or you can just type in the search function and it'll try to do a word match. And that's hopefully going to be able to get you some information. To begin the application, again, once you're on the dashboard, the first step you'll take is selecting your forgiveness application form. The SBA offers 3 different application forms. We're going to explain those in further detail. But once you select that form, that will dictate what information you're required to plug into your application. It'll determine what documentation is required to be submitted along with your application. And it'll also let you know whether or not you're eligible to use that particular application form. So once you've clicked that, you're going to move into the application, and it's just going to walk you through step by step of all of the information that you're required to plug in there to make sure that the money was used on eligible expenses, that it was used within the time frame, and met all the other criteria. You'll see right under the loan forgiveness calculation, there's a Schedule A worksheet. And there are 2 options. You can either manually enter the data, which is what your screen looks like right now, or you can enter it using a table. And if you click that table, this is what it looks like here. And it's going to give you the opportunity of putting specific information that's going to drill down to see how those payroll expenses were used. Again, going back to the eligibility there. So that's your Schedule A. You'll be able to see your estimated forgiveness amount in real time. So as you're plugging in numbers into each one of those boxes, you're going to see that amount going up. And that's just going to be a good indicator of what each of those numbers mean. And again, you can click on this, click to learn more about that. At the end of that first section, the loan application section, once you put all the information in, you're going to then be doing your certification, and you're going to see several initials followed by your signature, date, and time or title, which you will be typing in directly into that. But it's basically certifying all the information that you've done. And then once you've done that, you're going to click that next button there, which is going to move you to section 2. And this is where you're going to upload any required documentation of the loan. Again, I mentioned that the different loan application forms, each of which has different requirements of what documentation is required. And this is where you're going to be entering that. And so if you click on select files, it's going to allow you to upload Microsoft Word documents, Excel, PDFs, whatever that might be, to help give supporting documentation of that. You'll see that a document name, the way in which you saved it, will show up there. And then there's a drop-down box that gives a number of different explanations and descriptions of what that exact documentation is. And that's going to help the SBA determine whether or not you met the requirements for that. Next step, very important. Each time you select a file and select the file type, make sure you click upload before you add the next file. If you don't do the upload, you're going to have to redo it all, go back, re-upload those. So select the file, select the type, click upload. And then if you have more files, start the process over again. Once you've done all files that you want to attach, then you'll click that next screen. And that's going to move you into the third section, which is review and submit. The review and submit, there are 2 steps to that. The first one is using your mouse to electronically sign the application, and that's the full application from the loan application on the data you put in there, as well as the file uploads. You're going to sign it, click here to sign to apply your signature to the document. And what that's going to do is it is going to pull up a copy of the complete document with your signature. So all the information you put in steps 1, 2, and 3, you can scroll through this document, make sure that you entered all the information correctly, make sure you didn't leave any blanks there. And then once you are ready to rock and everything looks good, you are going to click submit. I'll mention this, once you click submit, you are not able to go back and make any changes unless you contact First National Bank Alaska, because once you click submit, that immediately is sent to us for review prior to sending it to the SBA. So be sure you review that entire application. You can also save or print that application up here at the top. If you want to keep that for your records, you can do that. But once you have clicked submit there, that is going to take you to the final step, which is confirmation. And this is just going to let you know that your application was accepted in our portal, that it was sent to First National Bank Alaska. Our loan officer will then be reviewing that application to make sure all the data looks good, make sure all the documentation is there. And then once we've reached that point, we will contact you. We'll let you know the status of that. If there's additional information we need, we'll let you know what that is. Or if everything looks great, we'll then submit that application to the Small Business Administration for review. At the current moment, the SBA is taking anywhere from 30 to 60 days to review applications and make a decision on the forgiveness. So we need to have a little bit of patience with that. I know they're a little bit log jammed there. So again, this page is just going to let you know that we've got the application, we've sent it out and whatnot. If you do have any technical difficulties with the portal itself, send us an email. This is our PPPFGV inbox. Send an email with your business name and we'll be able to help out, or contact your loan officer and they'll be able to do that as well. And with that, we are going to get into the specifics of loan forgiveness from our lending experts. We have started fielding questions about the portal as well as other things, so we're going to get to that as we get those. But let's dig in right here. And Carl, I'm going to turn it to you. If you'll just remind borrowers briefly, what are the eligible expenses and other requirements for?
Sounds good. Thanks, Louis. And I have seen a couple comments that my video may be a little delayed, so I apologize, but hopefully you can hear me okay. And we're going to start off with the forgiveness requirements. And the number one requirement is that the funds are spent on eligible expenses. And we'll get into a little bit more what those eligible expenses are, but that's the number one piece of the forgiveness, is that all proceeds were spent on eligible expenses. Next, at least 60% of that must be spent on payroll costs. That number was actually lowered from the original rules that came out. And what we have found is most folks have no problem meeting that 60%. And often folks have enough payroll alone that they don't even have to look at other eligible expenses for evidence of where they spent the funds. It all goes to payroll. And finally, the employee levels and the compensation must be maintained in order to get full forgiveness. And part of that will be in the questions that Louis talked about in the certifications online, that you're certifying that has stayed correct. So next we'll talk a little bit about eligible expenses. Payroll, that includes salary, wages, medical benefits. There are some limitations on salaries, on how much can be paid to any one person, and especially with the smaller businesses and the owner compensation, we have to make sure that those meet that criteria. But it's a pretty simple formula to walk through. Next is business mortgage interest. For the commercial property that businesses have, the mortgage interest is able to be considered as an eligible expense. Just a reminder, we've talked about it before, but if you lease from yourself, the next one, business rent and lease payments. If you lease a building from yourself, you can't consider that full lease payment. You can still consider the mortgage interest if it's a closely held building, but not the full lease payment if it's a closely owned business. And finally, utilities. And again, we've encouraged folks to start at the top of this list and work their way down, because often the payroll itself is enough to meet the criteria for utilizing all of those expenses within the covered period. And to talk just a little bit about the covered period, again, there's been a lot of program changes from when this first started, but when the program first started, it was an 8-week covered period, meaning you had 8 weeks to utilize the funds that you borrowed through the PPP loan. That was extended to as long as 24 weeks. So your covered period will be what you determine, but not less than 8 weeks and not more than 24 weeks. And that is the time frame in which those eligible expenses must occur in order to receive full forgiveness. So, Louis, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Carl. Definitely a lot of information there. At the end of the webinar, I will have a couple web pages for some SBA resources. If you need to get a little bit further explanation on some of those eligibility requirements and forgivable expenses. As for the application, Chad, I'm going to turn this over to you. When is the deadline for a borrower to apply for forgiveness in order to avoid having to make a first loan payment?
Well, first remember the terms of your loan. You have that covered period, which Carl said, all the terms were increased to that 24-week, 6-month period. So you got 6 months first for the covered period. Then you have 10 months of deferment. So you really wanted to get your application in before the end of that 10-month deferment, regardless of where the status is of your application is. At the end of that 10-month deferment, payments begin. And so at that point, you have to start making payments, and then you're on to your payments at that point.
Thanks, Chad. And another question we have here. So what if a borrower makes a loan payment before they've submitted that loan up or that forgiveness application? The SBA then fully forgives that loan and they're no longer required to make payments. What happens to that payment that they've already made?
Yeah, so this has been a frequent question because there's a lot of concern with that because, like we mentioned, it can take up to 90 days and the SBA has up to 90 days to respond and to give a final ruling on their forgiveness application. So during that period, you might exceed that deferment period. If you start making payments and then after the fact, we receive more from the SBA, those additional funds that you pay down in interest and in principal that were during the deferment period will be refunded back to you. They can be refunded back to you in two different ways. One, if we had your account already on hand and that's how we funded your note, we'll automatically go ahead and put that money back into that account. If we did not and we disperse the funds by check, then we will reissue a check for those excess funds received back from the SBA back to you. So there's no concern that, a lot of people felt like, well, if I start paying down this loan, then the SBA won't forgive that portion. I won't get that money back. But yes, you will get that money back, even if you have to start making payments after the deferment period where you're waiting for your forgiveness application to be approved by the SBA.
Thanks, Chad. Carl, question for you here. What happens if a borrower is notified by the Small Business Administration that their PPP loan was only partially forgiven or not at all forgiven?
Thanks, Louis. I'll expand a little bit on that question because the loans that aren't fully forgiven, there's kind of two scenarios which primarily happen. One, a customer applies for forgiveness, goes through the portal, works with their loan officer, and they realize for whatever reason they don't have enough eligible expenses, and so they know when they submit it to us that they're not going to be fully forgiven. And the second one is they put together their expenses, submit that through the bank. We review it, submit it to SBA, and then the SBA determines that something they submitted is inaccurate. The first step is the bank is the conduit with SBA. We'll receive the questions, the request for additional information, and then get with the customer to collect that additional information, go back to the SBA. And at the end of the day, if the SBA determines that the loan isn't fully forgiven, then the amount that isn't forgiven will turn into a loan to the SBA at 1% interest, which is serviced by First National Bank. So First National will send the billing statement, and that loan will be amortized at 1% interest.
Thank you, Carl. Chad, I'll turn this over to you. Once again, with application deadlines, what is the final deadline for a borrower to submit a forgiveness application in order to have their loan fully or partially forgiven, and any payments already made refunded?
Yeah, so a lot of people really thought that they had until the end of their deferment period to get done with their application. And so that caused a lot of anxiety for some people. I know they're coming up on their maturity dates, for that defer period. And so they wanted to get their applications in. Well, the reality is what we were informed back from the SBA is that you really have until the end of the maturity of your note. And so you do have a little more time, even past that. You will have to begin making payments, but you can continue to work on your application even after you make payments.
And where does a borrower find that maturity date of the loan?
Well, you can go on, when you go on to the application, you can find it on there on our portal. If you're having a hard time finding it, you're welcome to contact a loan officer. Just kind of a general is any of those loans that were issued prior to June 5th, 2020, they have a maturity date of 2 years from the date that loan was dispersed. Now, loans that were dispersed after that June 5th have a maturity date of 5 years from the disbursement date. So like I said, if you're not sure, where you kind of fell in that, you can always contact your loan officer. They can review your loan, get you that information so you can feel comfortable with where you're at and what your maturity date is and when your deferment period ends. So hopefully that answers the question, Lewis.
Thanks, Chad. Another question here about the form. So I showed everybody during the beginning when we were looking at the portal that there are 3 different application forms from which a borrower may choose when submitting that application. Carl, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you briefly go into those application forms here and put those on the screen because there's also a web page that they can go to see that there.
Thanks, Lewis. So when the forgiveness process first started with SBA, they came out with a form that they numbered 3508, and that was going to be the form that was used for all forgiveness. And as with many things with the PPP program, it's been very fluid, and the SBA has worked hard to try and simplify it. Sometimes it hasn't always felt like it was simplified, but over time they came up with a 3508 EZ form, which allowed borrowers with less complex forgiveness requirements to apply. And then ultimately they came out with the 3508S form. And that 3508S is a simple form. That form is the one that borrowers with loans of $50,000 or under are able to use. And so as you're going through the forgiveness process and in the portal, utilize this information. Make sure you find out which form best fits your business. What we've encouraged folks to do, start with the S, see if you're eligible for the simplest of the forms, and then kind of work your way up, because some customers have used the 3508 standard form, just the 3508, and it will work, but sometimes requires more documentation than they really need for the size of their loan. So look at the links that are up there, and there are also descriptions in the portal, and make sure you're using the best form for your business to limit the amount of documentation you have to provide.
Okay, Chad, question from one of our attendees here. What documentation do borrowers need to submit with their application?
So it really depends on which application you're using. And Carl said this best. We really are encouraging people to use that 3508S application. And the reason why is that the only thing that is required is the certifications that you use the funds for eligible expenses, that you are in the covered period, that you needed it. And right there's the borrower certification. Lewis just put it up, that you're using it for payroll costs. You're using it during the time period that needed to, and you used it, like we said, for eligible expenses, the interest, business rent, lease, and business utilities. So that's what's great about if you use the 3508S form, you do not have to upload supporting documentation. If you go to that next level, the 3508EZ, then you do need to put in the supporting documentation for your payroll. Here we go right here. Forget it. Maintain all compensation levels. You spend it eligible 60%, making sure that you're hitting all those. Carl really went into those really well. Eligible expenses, making sure you're hitting each one of those. If you're using the easy form, like I said, you're going to have to give supporting information on your payroll. You're going to have to show business interest, mortgage interest, which you can get from your statements, and you can supply those. If you're doing a lease, then you got to supply the lease, and then you got to show that the checks that you actually made for those lease payments if you're going to do the 3508 or the 3508EZ. So that's really important. Same thing with the utilities. You're going to have to provide the utility bills also with the application. But remember, that is only for the 3508 and the 3508EZ. If you choose to use the 3508S form, you do not have to supply any of the supporting documentation unless it is requested by the SBA. So we really encourage you to use that form. It's good for anyone who has a loan amount of $150,000 or less. So hopefully that helps people, Lewis.
Thanks, Chad. We are collecting quite a few questions from our guests about troubleshooting the portal, and some of these are specific to lending that Carl and Chad, you can answer. So Carl, I'm gonna let you take the first one here. I tried logging into your portal, but I got an authentication failed error message. What does that mean?
Thanks, Lewis. What we've found, one of the most common errors is not having your business name entered exactly how it was, or including dashes with the EIN number or the SSN number if that's how it's applied. So it's very important that you make sure that you type the business name exactly how it is, and make sure that you include the EIN or tax ID number with no dashes. That's been by far one of the most common problems. Few problems with browser issues. Internet Explorer is not one that's supported, but other than that, the user ID and tax ID, exactly how they are listed, is most important.
Thanks, Carl. And this is a good reminder. We mentioned earlier about that business name where if you're not exactly sure how the business appears on the application, or you're not sure who your loan officer is, to be able to get that information, send an email to our Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness inbox there, and they'll be able to help that information. Chad, going back to the forgiveness application forms, question we have here is, do I need to fill out a paper application and apply in your portal?
Absolutely not. As mentioned before, it is a completely paperless process. You just need to do it. We're only accepting applications through our portal. The other thing, I'll kind of go back a little bit to those eligible expenses, and also the documentation that you're going to upload. After it's uploaded and submitted to First National Bank, we are going to have a loan officer and or an expert review it, look at the documentation, make sure it's in line with what you submitted. We're going to do our best to make sure that we get our best foot forward when we submit that application. And so we want to make sure it's good. If there's a discrepancy, we'll work with you on what we think is an eligible expense. If you really have, more concern, we would highly recommend that you talk with your CPA or even legal counsel if you've got more questions in that on how that works.
Thanks, Chad. Another question, Carl, I'll have you take this one. If I started my application in your portal using one application form, and now I want to go back and change that form, what do I do?
Okay, Lewis, I think you have some, oh good, the slides are up there. So you start by, go to your application in the portal, and then you go to the loan application section. And if you're in the file uploads or the review and submit section, click previous. And once you select previous, you'll be able to, it'll take you back, and then you'll be able to select your desired application form. And any of the data that or information that you've inputted should still be maintained in there and go into the new application. So the information fields on the portal ultimately flood into a form that is the SBA form, but the fields will maintain that information. So if you start with one application and realize that you are better suited for another, you can go back and do it that way. And just to Chad's point about the EZ application, the EZ is not necessarily the easiest. So don't let the name, I would say, be fooled. Go with the S first if it fits, and then move down if required. So if you need help finding the right application, your loan officer can certainly help you, but there's lots of resources on the portal as well.
Thanks, Carl. Chad, next question for you. What is an NAICS code, and how do I find out what mine is? It's required on the application there.
Absolutely. Definitely a common question we've had in the past there. And you can even do, the way I pronounce it is NAICS. So, and that stands for the North American Industry Classification System. And, you know, there's two places that I've recommended for customers to find this. The first place you can look is on your business license. If you don't have that readily available, you can actually go and look on your business tax returns. Also at the top of the page, there's a box that says, hey, here's what my NAIC code is or my NAICS code is. And then the next last place that you could possibly look, and actually Lewis has done a great job, you can look at your business license search there at the website on the Alaska page that'll show you your business license. And then the next place you can look is a general one. It's not specific to you, but it's a general one. You can go on the NAICS codes and look it up by industry, and it'll get very specific at that point. So hopefully that'll help you kind of find that out. A lot of times that's not a code that people are used to having readily available, but there's several places that you can find it.
Thanks, Chad. Carl, how do I find out the status of my forgiveness application without having to call the bank?
Lewis, we are always happy to take phone calls, but I know a lot of people are interested maybe at an odd hour or other times. So you can always log right into the portal. And when you log into the portal, you go to section 4 of your application, and that will, the confirmation, and that will tell you exactly the status of your application and of the forgiveness. But like I say, we're always happy to answer those questions, but very easy to log into the portal and see exactly where it is anytime, day or night. So you got the up on the screen, Lewis. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Chad, I submitted an application in your online portal, but now I'm being told that I have an incomplete application and I need to sign it again. Why is that?
Well, the SBA has been very fluid in this process and has made several changes along the way. I think Carl kind of mentioned the history. We first started out with a 3508 application. Then we added the 3508 Easy application. And then later on, they came out with the 3508S application, which first they said was only eligible for people with $50,000 and under, but then they increased that to people who are $150,000 and under on their loan applications. So what happened is then they actually came out with a completely different form. and that they wanted that to be completed. So when that happened, we had to ask those people who were in the midst of doing their application to re-sign or recertify their application to meet the new standards and the new forms. And so a little bit of an inconvenience, but like I said, we want to make sure when we submit that application, it's the most latest application with the best information, which means you'll have the best opportunity to get a full forgiveness and have the least amount of problems. The other nice thing about it is, like I said, we really want to do it because we really haven't had many requests for additional information. And kind of going back a little bit on that 3508S application, like I said, you don't have to submit any of the supporting documentation. You do have to retain it and hold it in case the SBA asks for it and requests it. So you want to make sure that you keep your own paper copy. Don't submit it to First National Bank, but go ahead and keep your information and your file ready in case you're asked for additional information from the SBA. So hopefully that answers the questions, but it's pretty simple to go ahead and re-sign and recertify those pretty quick also.
Thanks, John. Carl, question for you here. For the payroll on the support document, a detail per employee will be needed showing the hours worked or a payroll summary with a dollar amount. Is that enough? So just writing out the detail, is that enough, or does a document have to be attached?
Louis, it does depend a little bit on which form we are collecting. Again, with the S form, we're just going to have the borrower certification. On the EZ form, we will require documentation be uploaded to support the payroll numbers that you've certified to in the certification. So a little bit different depending on the application that you are using. But if you're using anything other than the S, there will be documentation required.
Thanks, Carl. And I'm going to stay with you for the covered period. Is the starting date of determining eligible expenses the date the funds were transferred into my account?
Yes, for purposes of the starting of the covered period, that is the date of the loan disbursement, which generally occurred between 1 and 10 days after the date of application. Oh, excuse me, the date of the date we received the guarantee from the SBA. So whenever the funds went into your account, which corresponded with when you signed the loan documents, that is when the covered period starts.
Thanks, Carl. Chad, question for you about compensation limits. Does the compensation limits apply to all employees or just the owners of the business? Our employees are mostly highly paid medical doctors. They're all over $100,000 per year. I thought the only owner's compensation was limited.
No, it's not limited just to the owner. It applies to all those that are highly compensated individuals. So you really have to apply that $100,000 rule to everyone who is over $100,000, and there's a max limit on that. So make sure you pay attention to that because you don't want to include that overcompensation of those people that are making over $100,000 a year. So just watch that. You can talk with your loan officer and make sure that you're not exceeding those limits.
Thank you, Chad. And we do have a number of questions about the 2021 loan forgiveness, and I can take that one. So folks are asking, when will I be able to submit my 2021 application, and how will I be notified of that? We currently anticipate being able to start the process of 2021 forgiveness applications in late August or early September. We will be notifying anyone with a 2021 Paycheck Protection Program loan. We'll notify you by email when it is time to submit that application. Another question here is about logging into the portal that we've shown a few times here and only seeing your first Paycheck Protection Program loan, but not the second. The reason for that is we have two different application portals. So the one that you see today and the walkthrough of that, those are for the 2020 PPP loans. We will be sending out a link to the portal for the 2021. And if you got both your loans in 2021, both your first draw and second draw, we will be using the same portal. So you'll be able to go in, log in, and do both your forgiveness applications. So stay tuned for more information. We will notify you via email. And again, we plan to have a webinar next mid to end of August to be able to walk through this process as well, to be able to show you what that portal looks like, because it'll be a little bit different, as well as to answer specific questions about first draw versus second draw loans on there. So I'm going to quickly look to make sure that we don't have additional questions here. I'll give everyone just one more moment.
I might just add on that, Lewis, we're excited to get to the next round. We are really trying to kind of make sure that everybody is taken care of in the first round. But as always, talk to your loan officer if there's a need or something that is coming up that you need to discuss on that second round. Discuss it with your loan officer. We'll do our best to accommodate.
Thanks, Chad. So we looks like we have completed all the incoming questions there. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to your loan officer, Chad, Carl, and then also we showed you that PPP FGV email inbox. But let's leave on this. Carl, what would you believe are the top 3 takeaways from this webinar for our PPP customers?
Thanks, Lewis. I would say number one, just get in the portal and start the process. It's really fairly simple. I think you gave the numbers in the beginning, but we've already been able to help a very large number of our PPP customers get fully forgiven. So get in the portal, select the right form, make sure you're using the one that most fits your business and is as simple as possible. And Chad did make a good point. The S form started out at 50,000 and under, and I think I may have used that number originally. That is not correct. It's 150 and under can use that S form. So lots of changes, but use the simplest form possible and get in the portal, I'd say is number one. Number two, when you're going through your expenses, start with your payroll numbers, because we have found many customers have enough eligible payroll, especially with the extended covered period. They don't even need to worry about utility bills or other covered expenses. If you have enough with your payroll, move on with that. And number three, contact your loan officer if you have any questions. We are very proud to be Alaska's trusted PPP lender, and we have a lot of resources and a lot of very knowledgeable people all across the state that are more than happy to help you. So log in, it's pretty simple. Calculate your payroll, call if you need help. Those are my top 3, Lewis.
Thanks, Carl. Chad, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Well, I'm going to agree with Carl in the first one, is start now. Let's get in there, get started, get through the process. The thing you got to remember, and the reason why, is because it can, First National Bank, we're reviewing them pretty fast now, but we have 60 days to review it. And then the SBA has 90 days to review it. So there can be definitely some lag time there. So the sooner you start, the more you get in the queue, and you get that process going right away. The next one is to remember that your payments are due unless your loan is fully forgiven by the SBA prior to your first loan payment date. So remember, even if you're in the forgiveness process, you still need to make your payments. You don't want to be in default per the terms of your loan. That has to start after the cover period, which is 6 months, and then 10 months. Then 10 months, you have 10 months of deferment. So 16 months after your disbursement is when your payments are going to start, regardless of where you are at in the forgiveness period. Hopefully you get that 100% forgiveness and you don't even have to worry about it. Last is that knowledge center. I know Lewis did a good job of pointing it out, but there is a lot of powerful information in that knowledge center. most of your questions will be answered in the Knowledge Center. And it really is a fantastic tool to kind of learn about the process, what's expected, what's not. And it can really help you with a lot of your questions and save you time if you go through, and just a great resource to have. So that's what I'd leave you with, Lewis, is one, get on there. The process can take some time. Last, payments are going to be due regardless of where you're at. And last, use that Knowledge Center. It's going to help you understand the process and what the SBA is looking at also, and what we're going to look at. So hopefully everyone has a good experience, and we can help you through that process and make it as easy as possible.
Great points, Chad. Thank you very much. And once again, it looks like don't have any other questions there. Yeah, just looking at that there. So one more time, Chad, Carl, thank you both for all the helpful information. Thank you to all of our guests for attending. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Hopefully to be a lot of help for folks. I do just want to leave folks with some of the resources that we have available to you to be able to help with any part of the application or get a little bit more information there. So the SBA has a number of resources here on their webpage. So if you just take a look at that, you've got the frequently asked questions about forgiveness in general, as well as just kind of a further dive down into the programs there, which is going to show you information on the various application forms, a little bit more information on the details of eligible expenses and whatnot. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at the SBA's webpage there. And as we mentioned, 2 places that you can go for resources at First National Bank Alaska. The first being that webpage. Within the next couple days, we will be posting the full recording of this webinar. And that's the webpage there, fnbalaska.com/webinar. So you can go on there if you want to recap anything. Also be checking out that page, because that is where we are going to post notifications of upcoming scheduled webinars, including the 2021 PPP loan forgiveness information. And then once again, just showing you that email address there. If you're not able to get a hold of your loan officer, not sure who they are, that PPP FGV inbox. And I'll just show one more time, because Chad mentioned this as far as the Knowledge Center. And just to remind folks of kind of where to find that within the portal, it's going to be right there. So off to the left-hand side, there's the Knowledge Center. Clicking that, what that does is pulls up the commonly asked questions page there, where you can either select a topic on the left or actually just start typing something in and it'll try to do a word match. The other option, if they're asking a very specific question on the application form, you'll see off to the top right where it'll say click to learn, and that'll actually bring up more information. So one more time, we want to be able to have as many resources available to you as possible. As Alaska's trusted PPP lender, we want to do everything we can to make sure your loan is fully forgiven and avoid having to make any payments. So one more time, thank you to everybody for joining us, and hope this has been a good experience. Everybody have a great rest of your day.